Okay, yo, what's up? It's Wire Guitars. Wanted to do a bit of a build breakdown for my Power Siphon Trickster Miner. This time I did it with cold damage. I've been theory crafting, as you can see, the character's name is This Time We Do It Right. I've been theory crafting a cold damage version of the build. As you can see, all of our recipes are being unlocked from our character going from hardcore to standard, which shows that we just died. But anyways, I had been theory crafting a cold damage version of this character since my last character that died. Since around like the late version of that character, I've been thinking like, man, you know, a cold damage version of this character would be very easy to pull off at low investment. Basically doing nothing, as it turns out, with the Wrath gem. We were never doing really anything significant or noteworthy with Wrath, because it does provide flat damage, but truth is, the more spell lightning damage that you get from Wrath just isn't used at all. We did attack damage, so the only thing Wrath was giving us was a bunch of flat, just a pool of flat damage, kind of like Replica High Resire. Very similar, in fact. Wrath gives about like a little bit more than I think Replica High Resire does, a max roll Replica High Resire does, with respect to the flat damage. So I was thinking to myself, like, you know, a cold damage version of this build, scaling and then converting physical with Hatred, the skill gem that we all know and love, gives you, you know, 16% at level 1, or a level 19 version of Hatred gives you 25%. And then, of course, you scale a little bit of aura effect by getting reservation masteries and things like charisma. You can get Hatred and of course, a wand that is well rolled for physical damage. I was meaning to upgrade this. I was actually collecting a crap ton of corpses to do that.
Talking about why the build is so strong and what's so powerful about Hatred.
Just as a skill gem by itself is actually quite cracked for physical damage builds. I think most people know this. I'm not saying anything new. But it double dips with itself. It scales your physical as extra cold damage, so you can scale a bunch of physical. You get a percentage of all the physical damage that you scale added as extra cold damage. So that is, say, I have like somewhere between like 500 to 600 physical damage. Well, I can take 25% of it at level 19. At 25% of this, and again, you can juice this with aura effect. You can juice this by leveling it up past level 19, of course, level 20, and then you can actually corrupt it for 21, of course. You can do things like a lot of people will slot it into their gloves or their boots and then get like a +1 or a +2 Warcraft. The point of this is that you juice Hatred, and then Hatred double dips with itself because you get all that physical scaled as extra cold damage, and then it gives you more cold damage. So the extra cold damage that you're getting from your physical scaling does get scaled by itself. And then what you do after that is you, through non-elaborate means, especially for hardcore solo self-found, I don't even have access to Herm Sorrow, so through non-elaborate means, we just do very simple things like grab a cold mastery for 40% of our physical damage, convert it to cold so that we can then again dip on the more cold damage that we're getting on top of the fizz damage as extra. You can do things as well like Eldritch Crafter gloves to convert another, I think, like 20 to 30%. I didn't get those rolls. I instead just landed on suppress and cold damage to attacks, which is fine too. Another thing you can do for this build, again, because we're using fizz and cold to scale the build, and we're really scaling it off of physical damage, is you can get physical rolls on your rings, as you can see for prefixes. It makes rolling them kind of hard because they're, I don't know, I use rings to fix things like resistances and stats. So suddenly it's like I want a lot of stats from my rings. As you can see, a pretty good rolled ring right here. We've got the life, we got all res, we got cold res, and then we're getting, you know, some good fizz. We can roll flat cold. This is a darn good ring. Recoup is never bad. And then this one gives me a crap ton of strength. We got some life that we can roll on there from the bench. We've got some energy shield, of course, that we can make use of with Trickster. Speaking of that, I am still using Heartstopper. I just didn't get around to rolling a good chest piece as well. I think that was my main mistake for this build because I actually ended up dying to a Chaos Blast in Delve. My Chaos Max hit right now is very, very bad. I'm trying to use an Amethyst Flask to correct that. With increased effect, I can get it up to about, you know, 43%, but it doesn't last that long. I think my flask was down, and I was just sitting there, and I got hit by a big Chaos Crystal Blast in Delve at -60 Chaos Res with 3k or 3.1k life pool, because Energy Shield, of course, does not work against Chaos damage. So I got one tapped. It was very unfortunate, and I think it was by a spell that I didn't suppress. I can't be super sure about that, but I wouldn't expect it to be an attack that one-shot me with like Wind Dancer and stuff. Maybe it was, could be, but I feel like it's more likely that it was a spell because I don't think I had any of my flasks up, like I said. I don't think I had my Amethyst flask up or my Quartz flask. Without my Quartz flask, I was probably attacking, which brought my, as you can see, my spell damage suppression chance, probably brought it to 75% chance. Probably, can't be super sure about that, but this is another kind of like weakness I was trying to shore up in the build, was I was having mana problems, so I spec the skills cost life instead of mana cost. Well, that means that my Revenge of the Hunted basically never procs. So I was probably at like 75% chance to suppress spell damage, with lucky, to be fair, but something tells me that it was probably spell damage that hit me from the Chaos Crystals when I had none of my flasks up, and I probably just got unlucky and I didn't suppress it and it one-shot me with 3k life. That's probably what happened. I didn't record it. I should have recorded it. Anyways, yeah, I wanted to go over some of the defensive tech that I was using. So like I have my Golem. I am actually hooking up to a 4-link, or no, it wasn't a 4-link, it was a 3-link. So I have the Ice Golem, I have Precision here, that was right, because I wanted to fit in faster attacks for my shield charge. So I had to move Precision somewhere. The gem sockets on this build are not tight, but they become tight when you start wanting to put in your tech. So the main demands of the build are, of course, your attack, Power Siphon. You need a 5-link for that. And then beyond that, like, I guess you want Sniper's Mark, or you're going to want a Curse to boost the damage. And then you want Automation and Detonate Mines. And that's basically it. You can do anything else that you want.
So then, yeah, I just kind of wanted to show you what we are doing on this character with our other links, given this essential package of just going over it again real briefly and focusing specifically on the 2 things that I've added in here, because you will want 2 auras, probably one for defense, probably one for offense if you're running this build. I can't really think off the top of my head of how an armor variant of this build would work, but I'll just leave it at you'll probably want to run either Grace or Determination, probably Grace. And then if you're doing a cold damage variant of this build, you'll definitely want to run Hatred. If you're doing a lightning damage variant of this build, like I've recommended in the past, I'm not so sold on Wrath just because you don't get to take advantage of the spell damage scaling. If you wanted to do something else with the 50% mana that you have, but find a way to make sure that you can dedicate it towards getting about 10 to 20% more damage, I'd heavily recommend that, leaning more towards 20% damage. I think that's ideal. Anyways, so other than these gems, what can we do to make our character tankier? And so what I chose to do was, in our automation setup that we're already throwing Detonate Mines in there, I went ahead and tossed in an Immortal Call. Now, it is important to note that Immortal Call linked in with automation is going to cost a fair amount of mana. Now, and of course this should be taken into account with your auras up. You know, imagine I have these slotted in. This is not exactly a inexpensive thing. You will need to have a way to make sure that, especially if you're reserving mana with your mines as you are, that you're dealing with that reservation cost and the fact that your mana is going down. Now, one way that we deal with this is by anointing efficient explosives early on. It does help with the mana cost on the reservation, rather. It helps with the reservation cost on your mines a little bit, and that will mean that you'll have more mana to work with. But you, at the end of the day, will need a somewhat solid basis of mana regeneration that you can get from specking Alira or just helping Alira out early game. Later on, you get from just naturally getting a crap ton of intelligence, because you want to stack that anyways, because eventually we get damage from intelligence, but even before that, it does scale your defenses, it does scale your accuracy, and then in this case, because it scales your mana, it also scales things like our mana regeneration that we're getting from things like Deep Thoughts, Cold Art of Calculation, this mana node right here, you know, so on and so forth. You can get some mana on your gear as well. I don't believe I have any, but I know you can get some mana regeneration on rings for a pretty efficient amount. Mana still might feel a little weird with all of your automated setups. With all of the things that I am trying to automate in this build, between the Immortal Call with the automation, which you know, does increase the mana cost on it, but on top of that, I am running a Enduring Cry, a Call to Arms setup, which with all the support links that I'm running with that, does have its own pretty hefty mana cost associated with it. As you can see, this is 33 mana with the 14 life added tag there. That is because, and I think I mentioned this in the other video, I am taking the skills cost life instead of 30% mana cost mastery just to be able to afford all of my stuff. It's the price of defenses is that I have to do that. It's totally fine though. As you can see, that very small life price is absolutely worth any kind of thing that we're getting from it because we regen it back so quickly. The only thing this really negatively impacts is nodes like Revenge of the Hunted, which I unfortunately am taking. So even though that is it's annoying that I'm not always at full life, but the fact of the matter is just getting a little bit of health regen and then taking the skills cost life instead of mana mastery early can be a good way to help deal with the mana cost of things, such as all the things that you're automating. When I pay, say, 37 mana and 16 life every 3 seconds for Immortal Call, when that happens, and I guess it's actually not every 3 seconds, it's probably more like every 4 because the buff lasts for 1 second. So the buff triggers, it lasts for a second, and then it goes on cooldown, and then I pay the mana cost again. Every time that's happening, I am getting for that 1 second duration, and it does last longer if it's removing endurance charges, which are being generated constantly with Immortal Call. But as I said, I'll turn these off. If it consumes endurance charges, it's going to increase the buff effect duration. That's great. But then it's also going to increase the efficacy of the buff. It's going to make it way, way more powerful. It's going to make me take 15% less physical damage taken for every endurance charge that it's removed. So effectively, you have this buff that's like repeatedly hitting your character and making you super tanky. It is consuming your endurance charges, which are their own defensive layer that we're generating with our other tech of Enduring Cry. But it is for that package, you know, using a bit of our mana, which at the end of the day, if we have enough mana to cast our main attack, that's irrelevant, right? As long as we have the mana to cast our abilities, we don't really care however much mana is being spent on other arbitrary things. And with that, we're getting this very powerful rotating buff on our character.
So I want to talk about the Ice Golem that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see here, I got my little Brolem up. He's there. I don't have minion health bars. I should actually enable that setting real quick, as he is, of course, my friend. So he deserves his own health bar as well. There he is. He's kicking it. He's alive. I have him hooked up on a 4-link with, actually it's technically a 3-link with Meat Shield and Elemental Army. As I said earlier, Precision just needs a slot in the build. We can't substitute it out yet. I have to unfortunately settle for a 3-link here. By the time I'd be looking to remove Precision, I would be moving out of Ice Golem anyways. So Ice Golem is just kind of like, here is a temporary solution to the accuracy problem, mostly. It's the accuracy that I'm mostly relying on for Ice Golem. But then occasionally, Ice Golem will taunt enemies with Meat Shield. It's got a 20% chance to taunt on hit. And you can see here, like, he'll taunt the rare. You can just tank rares with Meat Shield, as Meat Shield also gives him a fair amount of damage reduction. He's not nearly as good as, like, the Stone Golem is in AoE situations. If I can just hop back out real quick here and show you kind of what I'm talking about. Actually, I don't have a leveled Stone Golem in hardcore solo in solo self-found standard, so I wouldn't be able to show you a level 19 Stone Golem in place of this Ice Golem. But Stone Golem, rest assured, he has no problem surviving in situations like this in, monster level 72 zones. Your Stone Golem will be a fair bit tankier than you. Your Ice Golem is like probably on par with respect to tankiness to you, but then he also just makes very dumb decisions movement wise, so he often dies. He just often dies. He dies fairly often. That's kind of something that's like annoying about the Ice Golem. You can resummon him, as I am. You can also hook him up to a trigger wand. You can't hook him up to automation because it's not an instant spell. You can also just invest in minion defenses a bit, which is kind of what I've done with my links, which is again why this build is kind of nice. We don't have too many gem links that we have to worry about. We have on a hardcore setup, we have the gem sockets to spare for a golem if we need one, especially for a hardcore setting where the regen from Stone Golem can be very nice for lab. It can be just nice in a general mapping context. And then the taunt that the Stone Golem applies on its 3rd attack is, I believe it's like guaranteed. So you have if you equip him with Meat Shield, you have the 20% chance that Meat Shield provides on all of his regular attacks to taunt. And then also every 3rd attack, he's going to do a guaranteed AoE slam, which is also 100% chance guaranteed to taunt enemies. Stone Golem also has the health regen effect that applies to itself. So for that reason, it kind of has its own self-sustaining mechanism. It can be quite tanky as a golem. if you want a bit more of a defensive setup. Again, I really need the accuracy from Ice Golem, so I'm using Ice Golem. That's the main reason why I'm using Ice Golem. It's not for the exposure, it's not for the crit or anything like that. I'm well above crit cap. It's literally just like, I need accuracy, otherwise I'm not even able to hit the enemies and crit them in the first place. So Ice Golem is my damage solution with that, with respect to that. But he also gives me a source of exposure, saves me a passive point, actually saves me probably a good 4 passive points, because I'm dedicating this cold mastery to the physical conversion one, and if I wanted another cold mastery, if I wanted access to it, I'd have to go down and get some crap like this, or, you know, I don't even get any damage from these nodes, so I'd have to come probably honestly like down here, awkwardly enough. Even though these are like good points, it would just take a while. And so here's a boss. Unfortunately I killed him, but I really wanted to show Ice Golem in those single target setup, in those single target situations where I think he really shines with the taunt and with his, I guess with his specific chassis of not being super tanky in mob settings and not being like very able to control things, but like, you know, he can definitely lock down a single target, and he's not exactly squishy. He's about as tanky as you are, again. And if he's not able to like run into things like heist degens or delve degens, like if he's got bad movement, but in a boss fight where like you're just against a map boss, there's not typically too many things you got to worry about. You know, there's not a bunch of ground degens in most map boss arenas that you have to worry about. So he will be useful, to say the very least. Outside of just the buffs that he grants you, he will occasionally be just tanking shit for you. There is the drawback, I suppose, of rolling maps now that have things like monster projectiles can chain. Those map mods are kind of like the great equalizer. This is like an unnecessary backstory on map mods. Map mods are like the great equalizer of most builds. They are where most builds come to face at least some weakness, and minion builds, summon builds, proxy builds, whatever, if you use some other damage source or some other literal thing that you summon with a health bar to do your damage or to do anything for your build, well, those map mods that say like projectiles chain or projectiles fork or what, I don't know if there's a fork one, but the map mods that allow monsters to do greater amount of like proliferation with their attacks, those map mods are like targeted at minion builds. They're like really like, you know, screw minion builds is kind of like what those map mods are saying. And unfortunately, you're kind of making yourself a minion build by even just attaching a minion to yourself, because you're basically giving the monsters a chain vector, right? Your Ice Golem runs in to the middle of pack, something you'd never do, and then suddenly a bunch of monsters target it. All the projectiles hit hit your Ice Golem. Your Ice Golem doesn't have your kind of evasion, right? So all of the projectiles hit the Ice Golem. He dies instantly, and then all those projectiles that are hitting him chain off and start targeting you. So there is I guess you would say there's always that layer of you know, give and take. PoE is a beautiful game. There's caveats to everything. If you're playing a build that uses a minion, there are map mods that can screw over minion builds, and you're kind of making yourself into a minion build by incorporating a minion. So just be aware of that. I just need to add that. Not a lot of people talk about these kinds of things. My channel is aimed at talking about these kinds of things, exploring the depth, whatever. Hey, just be aware of that. Of course, remember that you can capture It That Fell from the Underground River map with a Divine Vessel. Just make sure to put the Divine Vessel in the map device, and then the map should also be in the map device. So you run one of these, and it can be white. You don't have to roll it. It's totally fine if you want to make it super easy on yourself, because the Divine Vessel does come with a few like very small buffs to the map boss. You just run these two together, and then after you kill the map boss, you come back out. This will be filled in your map device. Pull it out, go talk to Sin from I guess, you know, any of the towns. You can go, I'll show you exactly where Sin is. Yeah, you just go talk to this guy. Boom, there you go. You get your point. So really, all in all, we have a pretty tanky character here just in SSFHC with 30k evasion, 98% suppression effectively with our flask up, and that's with the lucky talent spec, and most of that suppression coming just from the tree. The majority of our evasion just coming from a Jade Flask, a flask suffix for increased evasion, and Grace, all being leveled, and then taking 2 aura wheels that have increased aura effect.
We are freeze and chill immune because, of course, we're Trickster. We have one step ahead. We have a fair pool of life and energy shield combined at 3.1k life and 900 energy shield. Pretty darn vulnerable to a chaos hit. This is one of the big things that I was afraid of and what ended up killing us, I believe. I could have taken the tolerance wheel that is super close to the shadow start. I think that would have done wonders for our chaos resistance. You get like, let's see, 7, 13, 20. You get like 49% chaos resistance from what for my build would have effectively have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Probably 6 I would have gone for the mastery. Questionably worth it. A fair number of points invested. But I do believe tolerance is quite strong, actually. I think it's a fairly underrated node. For nothing else than just the chaos res and the fact that it gives you access to a protection mastery. I mean, the avoidance layers on the 40% chance to avoid poison and bleed is not nothing. You can very easily get void cap with just this wheel, even without taking the dedicated nodes, just taking the chaos resistance and avoidance, and then taking the chaos, and then taking the tolerance. Like, going for the chaos resistance in this wheel, you can still get to effectively bleed and poison immune with this wheel and a boot suffix. I didn't do that. I couldn't do that. I don't have a veiled orb. You know, I am in solo self-found, so I couldn't get a veiled orb in time to craft boots to try to go that route, but that is definitely an option. I should have definitely, 100%, I needed to incorporate more chaos resistance into this build. It's the one weakness. Back to our layers of defenses, though, I should also mention that 30k evasion is getting scaled with a Generosity Dread Banner setup, which is just a straight up evasion multiplier. We also have Wind Dancer. We are also shock immune because of the charge mastery from Disciple of the Forbidden that we're taking. And then I kind of have these next defensive layers listed under tech, where Endurance Charge Generation with Enduring Cry and Immortal Call with the Call to Arms tech, you know, that's not always up, but we are getting endurance charges and then boosting their effectiveness. We're getting a little bit of life regen, and then we're also getting Immortal Call's insane mitigation effectively layered in as a guard skill that's kind of just rotating under character. Again, not reliable, but nice to have as a rotating defense. We also obviously have our golem of choice on solo self-found hardcore. I don't see any reason not to incorporate something like that on a 4-link if I can spare the extra links. I'm using 2 movement skills for our ability to traverse the map. I think I settled on Frostblink. I think Frostblink's quite nice. The chilling ground it drops is underrated in my opinion. I think people don't value controlling mobs enough as a defensive layer. I kind of consider it a layer of avoidance, where if the mobs can't hit you, then you don't even have to worry about really anything theoretically. And this doubles, like, this is especially true for our build in a way that I haven't really touched on yet, which is by going cold damage, we can actually scale our cold damage up to a strong enough amount that, as you can probably see in the gameplay footage, we are rather consistently freezing even map bosses. So of course we're, Power Siphon, Trickster, Miner, we're still doing that. So we're still scaling Power Siphon with power charges, we're getting crit capped, and because we're going Hatred, because we're scaling so much cold, when you crit with any elemental attack, you have a guaranteed chance to apply the ailments with all of the elemental damage types that you have. However, when it comes to things like freeze, and especially freeze, but I think chill as well, if you freeze below a threshold that is correspondent with, like, if you're cold damage, because only cold damage can freeze normally under normal circumstances, again, hard to generalize in this game, but under normal circumstances only your cold damage can scale your freeze, like the freeze duration, as well as the chill effect. And the more cold damage you do, the longer the freeze will last, the more strong the chill effect will be. But if your cold damage, the flip side of that is if you don't have enough cold damage, you won't even freeze the target, and your chill will be very puny. We did effectively get around a 6 to 8% chill with the other solo self-found hardcore version of this character, not with the main character I have on softcore trade, Necropolis, level 100, Mage Blood, 400 million DPS easily achieved, basically immortal,
all content uber cleared. I'm not doing any cold damage in that build. I've completely gone the int stack lightning scaling route. Let's not kid ourselves about that. But when it comes to just low investment, splashing in some extra elemental damage types on gear, because hey, I just rolled a wand that has lightning damage instead of cold damage, or the other way around. I have an item that gives me lightning damage, flat lightning. You just roll with it. With the elemental damage that you kind of just naturally pick up on trash gear, you're getting both ailment types with this build pretty consistently. I was chilling things on my other build, and I am shocking things on this character, but I gotta say, I very much prefer the defensive layer provided by chill and freeze over the offensive layer provided by shock. I don't even feel like shock is a status ailment, to be completely honest with you, because of how lightning damage works with it. If you're scaling lightning damage and you're going shock, man, I may as well just assume shock's not even there, because sometimes lightning damage does no damage even when you have a massive shock applied to the enemy, because it's lightning damage, and sometimes it does a crap ton of damage. You can obviously circumnavigate this, and we do by scaling a lot of flat. Lightning damage is one of the damage types in the game where, through things like Archmage, or in our case with our softcore trade character, just stacking a crap ton of intelligence, you can get lightning damage flat for doing that. For like, basically those serve as engines for your damage scaling, for all of your flat damage scaling more specifically. And when you do that, when you get enough flat damage, lightning damage starts to feel really consistent, because you just have so much of it that even the low end becomes its own high end when you start to talk about like how you're scaling your crit to be 600%, and like basically even your lowest roll, when you have enough investment in flat lightning damage, becomes actually pretty respectable, but only at very, very high investment typically. With this character, just going cold damage, you got a super smooth, consistent playstyle, because our maximum and minimum hit is not between 1 and an absurd amount. It's more normalized, as cold damage tends to be. We also get to, like I've mentioned, take advantage of Hatred's broken double dipping inherent in the skill gem, and then we get to convert all of our damage from physical to cold for even more damage scaling. We don't really get to benefit the same way with physical conversion with lightning damage, because Wrath doesn't scale our physical lightning damage, if that makes sense. It only scales our spell lightning damage, and because, as I've mentioned, Power Siphon is an attack, we're not casting a spell, we don't get that inherent double dip. Hatred is just a more swell, low to mid investment gem overall before we can get like an int stacking lightning damage wand. Hatred by far and away is a more efficient option for scaling our damage. And then again, just like that chill, that freeze layer of it's really difficult to describe, because it oftentimes means that monsters don't even get the opportunity to interact with any of your defensive layers. It is really kind of a feast or famine, all or none. Either you're chilling things either you're freezing things, and usually the stuff that doesn't really need to even be frozen, because you're going to one-shot it anyways. That stuff's getting completely frozen, and especially given the fact that our projectiles can off-screen enemies, you will often find yourself clearing the entire screen and then like going like off-screen a little bit, and then seeing that like there's shards of ice from mobs that were killed off-screen. You just kind of blow the screen up. When you get to that level of damage assertiveness, then the fact that you're freezing all of those enemies isn't really relevant. They're just dead. And then the rares that you're coming up on that take like 2 or 3 hits, well, because your damage is chunking them for like 30% of their health, they are still getting frozen, and you're chain freezing them. That feels really nice. I've got to say, not having to interact with a lot of rare mobs because you just freeze them to death. Same thing with map mods. That feels really map bosses. Sorry, map bosses. Tanky rares, we can still freeze them. We don't have to interact with them. The damage isn't so balloony and insane with the cold damage scaling yet. We can push it. I can push a lot more cold damage off this build for sure. I bet I could hit like top end maybe 10, maybe 15 mil. I'm not sure. If I was really, really juicing this crap, like if I took this character over to Trade League and I was min-maxing it there, I don't know. The sky's truly the limit. You could do a lot with even like a cold damage wand archetype. There's no reason why scaling like why I couldn't just try to find some different route for scaling cold damage. And that actually sounds really interesting to me, because again, I can't stress enough, like shock is, it's just you just gain more damage, but cold chill, that's like it's transformative. The mobs literally have no action speed when they're frozen, so they don't move. It's kind of broken. Like, they can't do anything. They can't literally cast spells, attack you, move, anything. They're easy targets as well. It's very easy to get your damage off more consistently when the mob has to stand still. And this build, more than other builds, does have a bit of a sweet spot and like an aiming requirement to it, where, and I've talked about this in other build guide videos about this, we have 3 mines that we want all hitting the target at the same time, and if that's not happening, we're losing like a lot of our damage. So yeah, chill, super fantastic. Freezing things, super fantastic. Hatred, going cold damage with power siphon mines. That's the main thing we're doing here, and that gets a 2 thumbs up for me.